Welcome back into Sports Memo's betting podcast. College football, every game on the board. Next guest up, Robbys Veno. Rob, welcome in. How you doing?
I am doing great today. Drew, how about yourself?
Good, man. And we're starting off with a good one in the Big 12 up first. Oklahoma State, 63.5 being the total. And we're talking about the Cowboys traveling to Ames, Iowa, facing Iowa State here, with Iowa State laying doubles at home, seeing 10.5 mostly across the board, Robbie.
Yeah, and I think it might be a little bit inflated, Drew. Obviously, Iowa State becoming a darling of bettors at this point in time, and Oklahoma State absolutely burnt everybody's money last Saturday with the Baylor game. So I think there's a little bit of that factored into the line. Power ratings show it should be about 5.5. Instead, we're staring at 10. So there could be value on the Oklahoma State side. But it's hard, Drew, to go against this Iowa State offense. I know I'm repetitive when I say it each week, but I look it up and keep adding it together each week, and it's now only 7 3-and-outs all season long for the Iowa State offense. You wouldn't think of it in that category of like an Oklahoma or, any top-flight offense you can think of across the country. But Brock Purdy and company have been so efficient, and right now, can't really be stopped. So I don't know how Oklahoma State's going to do it here. They'll have to be able to score with Iowa State. Usually not a problem for Oklahoma State, led by the outstanding running game. I'll say this. I know a couple of Oklahoma State supporters, alumnus, that are already looking past Spencer Sanders and on to the next Oklahoma State quarterback. A lot of folks that root for that team just don't believe he's the answer right now. Hasn't played well as of late, but I think he can do well enough here. My first look here, Drew, is to the over, because I think Iowa State can score at will, and Oklahoma State probably can match another Big 12 track meet. Not really convincingly, but I think that's the way I'd go.
And, Robbie, you brought up the fact, Oklahoma State burning people's money last week. I was one of them on the Cowboys. And kind of grading it out going forward, I don't know, man. I kind of want to look to be betting on them more so, even going back to the well on a team I just lost to. But want to get just your quick thoughts here on going forward with Oklahoma State. Have you changed things, or do you still like this team going forward?
Yeah, no, power ratings, like I say, Drew, indicate they should only be a 5.5-point underdog here. So there's line value, in my mind at least, to be had here with Oklahoma State. And they're just one of those teams. They're difficult to handicap, but they can cover any week, and they could get, beaten to the ground like they did by Baylor any given week. It's that defense just never seems to get better. However, the offense is always a constant, and if the defense comes to play, they're always in it, Drew. Let's face it. They can score with anybody, so I don't have any different opinion on Oklahoma State. I think they are what they are.
Robbie, next game up, a good one in CUSA. FIU at MTSU. That's Florida International at Middle Tennessee State. Rotation number 171-172, a 12:30 Eastern kick in Murfreesboro. We got FIU laying 2 on the road, 59 the total, Robbie.
Yeah, not sure that I want to lay it with Florida International. But what scares me about Middle Tennessee is the fact that they lost maybe their best defensive player last week. I happen to have the total in that MTSU North Texas game last week, and they got over in the end. Some of that in part, Drew, because Middle Tennessee loses their free safety, Reed Blankenship, who's much more than just a free safety for that team. Probably their best tackler. For anybody who's watched MTSU, you know him as number 12. He's all over the field most of the time. Had ankle surgery. He's out. Losing a captain on defense like that is a little bit scary, but I don't know that James Morgan and company have done anything offensively to back me off of MTSU here. It looks as if they're going to stick Middle Tennessee. They're going to stick with Asher O'Hara at quarterback. It was interesting last week. They pulled him after 3 quarters, brought in Chase Cunningham, a redshirt freshman. He directed 2 touchdown drives at the end of the game to get them into a tie situation with North Texas before they lost. But it looks like O'Hara, the dual threat quarterback, he's a little more like a run-first guy. I don't know how much you've seen of him, Drew, but it looks like he drops back, looks real quick, and then just kind of takes off looking to run. He's a tough runner for a little guy.
Yeah,
but,
Robbie, I've seen him play, and And I thought he's done a pretty decent job. And you're right, he didn't play that good this past game. But overall, stepping in for Brent Stockstill, I've graded him out as actually pretty decent quarterback. But I'm guessing you feel opposite?
Well, not me, but Coach Stockstill did.
Yeah.
I mean, like I say, I had the game. And when he made the move, I'm like, oh, it might not be good seeing Chase Cunningham in there. He did what a lot of guys do in relief. They came in, kind of saved the day. But the fact that the head coach is going back to O'Hara tells me that's the guy he believes in.
Yeah.
Maybe just a little bit of the, in the penalty box type situation. Don't like FIU's competition lately. MTSU's played much better competition. Florida International barely gets by El Paso last week, 32-17. I mean, they beat up on Massachusetts and Charlotte, two of the worst defenses in FBS football the 2 weeks prior. Didn't show much last week. Like I say, Drew, that we came into the season, I think both of us thinking that FIU had a pretty good shot here in Conference USA. That opening game, they didn't play well. I think it was Tulane who routed them, and it hasn't been great ever since. So for me, it would be Middle Tennessee. Like I said, I'm just a little tentative because of the Blankenship injury on defense. MTSU's not that great on that side of the football to be losing their best player.
Good stuff to start off there, Robbie. Next game up, staying in Conference USA, FAU at Old Dominion. We're seeing a bigger number here on the Owls, 13.5 or 14 on the road, 50.5 the total, Robbie.
Yeah, here's one I like, Drew, because I think when FAU this season gets a team that they can push around, they push them around. And Lane Kiffin's preference is to get that physical style running game going and then tempo you to death with first downs and then let Robeson loose through the air. And they become really balanced. They've had some games where they've been really good offensively both ways. And this is a team they could do it against. ODU is horrendous in the trenches. In Conference USA play, they're last in rush offense. And I think they're 10th out of 14 teams in rush defense. And it seems to me, Drew, when you go through their statistical logs, that defense is just fading, kind of wearing out. We're into the 8th game now, and the numbers are getting progressively worse on Old Dominion's defensive side. They don't have any offense to combat Florida Atlantic with. That loss last week to Marshall probably stung a little bit for FAU, and I could see a big bounce back here. It's still a team that's in contention to win that side of Conference USA and maybe get themselves to the championship game. So I just, I'm pretty much a believer in FAU when they have the opportunity at the line of scrimmage to push people around. And I think that's what they'll do here.
Yeah, and Robbie, I think you're pointing to the fact that, FAU in Conference USA is one of, heck, I think you could make the argument, the most talented team, roster-wise. But why don't you, in your opinion, one, do you agree with me in terms of, how talented they are compared to the rest of Conference USA? And also, in your opinion, why aren't they able to kind of roll teams a little bit more in this conference?
Yeah, I'm not sure that they were more talented than Marshall last week. I think they're probably on an even par. Marshall's a really good defensive team. Went to Boise, only gave up 14 points.
True.
So a close game there to be expected, I think. They're in the upper echelon, obviously, a CUSA elite. But these types of teams where they're 13.5-point favorite and they have every advantage in the world, I think these are prime situations to play Florida Atlantic.
Yeah, interesting. You're right on the Thundering Herd. They did play them pretty tough, and wasn't out of nowhere that they lost that game. We got Ohio at Ball State up next in action. 2.5 here on Ball State, 61.5 the total, Robbie. Ball State's been taking some money each and every week for the last couple. You agree with it?
Well, they've been good. They've been good to the money. They're 3-0 inside that West Division now. Surprisingly enough, Drew, I don't know that many preseason prognostications had Ball State winning that side because that's the difficult side of the MAC when you have Western Michigan and you have Toledo. It's tough to win there, but they're 3-0 right now. Quarterback Drew Plitt leading the way. Ohio U surprising to me because they've been so disappointing this year that they're 2-1 and in first place in a 3-way tie in the MAC East to show you how weak the MAC East is. I think they're tied with Miami O and Kent State. But Ohio U's defense, Drew, has been absolutely abysmal for the better part of this season. That's their problem. They just can't stop anybody, and it's not indicative of a Frank Solich team, especially in MAC play since he's been at Ohio U, and it's not indicative of the talent that they returned on defense. A lot of people thought that would be the anchor to this team. Nathan O'Rourke, the quarterback, obviously the first guy you think of when you think of Ohio U, but the defense was supposed to be really good. It has not been. Ball State, just to give you some insight into my power ratings, they right now are second in the nation in most improved or plus minus. They've gone up 11 points in the power rating since the start of the year. The only team that's improved more than them is Georgia State. So Georgia State, then Ball State. The counter side to that, Ohio U is fifth worst in that same category. They've gone backwards 9 points this year. Makes this a more competitive game than we would have thought way back in week one. I'd like to see what this line would have been way back then, because I have 20 points worth of power rating movement to this point. I think Ball State's the better team. I never want to sell Ohio U short, but the defensive disparity really is there. Ball State is at least capable of stopping people. Right now, Ohio U's not. I could kind of see a high-scoring game. Ball State wins 52-14 last week against Toledo, but let's not forget that Mitchell Guadagni did not play in that game. They had to start a freshman quarterback in his first start. You take that for what it's worth. But I do think they might, at home, they might be the better team here. Ohio U just hasn't shown me enough on defense this year. It's not getting any better for them.
Good stuff, Robbie. Heading to the SEC West, we got Arkansas and Alabama. Looks like the Tide laying 31 in Tuscaloosa, 55.5 the total, Robbie.
Yeah, all the talk is surrounding Tua, right? So we get I tried to go this way, Drew. You and I have talked about this a lot. Alabama totals, right? They always seem to be in that 61 to 63 range. So I went back and I took an average of what their totals have been so far this season. They average out to 61.7 or 62. This week, we're looking at 55, which from that side of the coin tells me that the odds makers think Tua is worth a touchdown. Probably the same in the line, where we see a little bit of line difference here. I had Alabama 38 with Tua playing. Right now they're at 31. So about a touchdown there as well. But I don't want any part of Arkansas. I'll take Mac Jones and all the surrounding talent that Alabama has. You could almost liken it to Matt Moore with Kansas City right now, right? The Chiefs have all the skilled players around him. All he has to do is go in there and get those guys the ball. That's probably what Mac Jones has to do in this game. Arkansas's quarterback situation, a mess because Ben Hicks got hurt last week, and now he and Nick Starkel. It's kind of a toss-up who's going to play here. I will say this. A quote from head coach Chad Morris of the Arkansas Razorbacks said that, that Ben Hicks gives them the best chance because he checks in and out of protections much better than Starkel. So you'd like to have Hicks on the field against Alabama. It might be a real good elixir for the Alabama young defense. The defensive front is youthful, but Arkansas's offensive line is really deteriorating due to injury. I can't like anything about Arkansas right here. Don't want to lay 31. And to tell you the truth, if I could count on Arkansas for 17, I would probably be all over the over in this game. Just don't know that I've gotten to that point yet.
Yeah, and with the change at the quarterback position, always a difficult handicap in what Alabama is going to do. Next game up, we got SEC action here, Robbie. South Carolina at Tennessee. But first, guys, the coupon code VENO199 will give you the rest of Robbie Veno's college football season for just $199. So for less than $200, you can get rest of the regular season. It includes all the bowl games all the way through the national championship game for under $200. That coupon code is VENO199. That's VENO. 199 at checkout. And Robbie, staying in the SEC here, we got South Carolina, Will Muschamp's group, on the road at Tennessee. 47 being the total, and the Gamecocks laying 4 in the hook in Knoxville.
You know, for them, Drew, and it's kind of that time of year when we start to look at these teams and their possibilities for a bowl game. South Carolina beats Georgia, goes absolutely crazy because they beat Georgia. But that aside, they're a 3-4 football team. They need 3 more wins in order to get to a bowl game this season. They've got the schedule starting with Tennessee to be able to do it. Their next 3 games are Tennessee, Vanderbilt, and Appalachian State. So 3 winnable games for South Carolina. The last 2 are going to be at Texas A&M and home to Clemson. Those 2 not as winnable. So I think for South Carolina, extremely important here. Tennessee suffering from the same thing that Arkansas is suffering from at quarterback. Last week, Brian Maurer gets knocked out for the second consecutive game. Justin Garantano has to come back in, but only goes 7 of 16 for 55 yards. Their quarterback play just isn't there right now. South Carolina played Florida extremely tough for 3 quarters in the rain last week. Fourth quarter, Florida broke loose. But South Carolina moved the ball on offense. Tavion Feaster, Rico Dowdle, Brian Edwards at wide receiver, quarterback Ryan Helinski. They look good. They were able to hang right in there with Florida. That's a good defense that they put 27 points up on. I think I'd have to look at South Carolina in that game or no way at all.
Robbie, heading to the Big 12 here, we got Oklahoma at Kansas State, 57.5 the total. The Sooners laying 23.5 in the Little Apple.
Yeah, we used to always, when this game would come up during the season, Drew, the immediate knee-jerk reaction was always Bill Snyder will slow the game down. He'll grind out enough clock. He'll frustrate the Oklahoma high-flying offense enough to go ahead and get a cover. And maybe that's the way you look at it here with Chris Kleiman as head coach. But I just don't know that holds as much water as it used to hold. This Kansas State offense under the new head coach hasn't been good. They have to be able to run the football and grind clock. They have to be able to stop the opposing offense. They just did it to TCU, but barely, 24-17. Oklahoma's no TCU. For my money, I don't think that they have much of a chance of stopping the Oklahoma offense. Nobody's done it so far. And if we just get away from the Oklahoma offense for a minute, much like Ohio State now, people start to talk about their defense. Oklahoma very improved on the defensive side under Alex Grinch, the new defensive coordinator. And if K-State can't get anything going, wow. I have a hard time seeing them stay close here. 23.5, Oklahoma can make it look small. In my estimation, you probably have to get if you get 17 out of Kansas State, it might not be enough. You probably have to get 20 here in order to find your way to a cover. 42-20 would probably get you there. But I don't see Kansas State stopping Oklahoma from getting to that 40 mark. Once they get rolling every week, it seems like consecutive drives start producing points. Once they start to roll, they really roll. I probably won't play it, but I would think of Oklahoma if I had to.
All right, Robbie, next up in the Big Ten, we got Maryland at Minnesota. And talking the Gophers here, man, they've been off to a great start, and they're laying 15 in the hook at home, 58 the total, Robbie.
Undefeated team, no look ahead for them because they have the bye next week. So we can't, make a situational spot out of this for Maryland. I happen to love the Minnesota team, and I think the best part of them is the unheralded offense. And Tanner Morgan's a serviceable quarterback, but that stable of running backs, whether it's Ibrahim or it's Shannon Brooks or Rodney Smith, and then the wideouts that they have on that team, Rashad Bateman and Tyler Johnson, those guys are NFL wide receivers. So I think that part of their team is so overlooked, Drew, and they're starting to prove it. Much like Iowa State, you don't consider them to be a team that can post a lot of points, but they're doing it, and they have the ability to do it, and especially against a Maryland defense that's just been, below average all season long. Now, for Maryland, I don't know which quarterback's going to go. Pigram is hurt. Josh Jackson's been hurt. If neither can answer the call, it's going to be a true freshman, but I think one of those two will probably be your starter here. Interesting listening to Mike Locksley, head coach of Maryland, last week say that he felt the week before, I think it was against Purdue, I can't remember exactly, but he said they didn't play fast. Obviously, they've got a depletion of their strength, which is their running backs. The running backs just keep getting hurt on that team, but Locksley thought that they needed to play a lot faster. Last week they did, came close against Indiana, didn't get the money. They're probably just not good enough to get a victory in that game, and they're probably not good enough to get one here. Minnesota would really have to fail. I don't see it happening with P.J. Fleck coaching this team. I think Minnesota's a play here, and probably more than that, I like the over. I think Minnesota can get to 40, and Maryland is always good for, or should always be good for 20 points with their speed and their athleticism.
Robbie, next game up, we got some AAC action here. Tulane at Navy. And, guys, just remember we only got 2 games left here. And remember the coupon code VENO199 at checkout. get the rest of his college football season for under $200. That's VENO 199 at checkout. Tulane at Navy, Robbie, 56.5 being the total. We got Navy laying 3 in the hook. Tulane off of that loss. I don't know, man. I don't know what to do with the Green Wave going forward, but how do you feel about Tulane and Navy?
Yeah, boy, a lot of people thought Tulane had a real chance against Memphis last week. I won't say that I wasn't one of them. I didn't have the game, but certainly I thought it would be a lot more competitive than the final score. Memphis just took them to task. This week, though, Drew, I think, whenever you have Navy, you usually open with, 1 week to prepare for the option is very, very difficult. However, Willie Fritz has made a living coaching option, so it shouldn't be as hard for Tulane to defend against Navy as it is for other teams. I think certainly he's the type of head coach that I have faith in to get his team to bounce back. I think Navy's played a soft schedule up to this point. They've been very good, and they've had really good results, not only straight up, but point spread-wise. They've been excellent so far this year. You can't fault what Navy's done. If you've been backing them all season long, you're making a lot of money. But in this instance, I think a Tulane bounce back. I think Tulane being familiar with the option, even though they don't run it themselves anymore, the head coach knows how to coach the defense this week. Tulane and Navy have played close games in this conference since they've become conference mates. But I like Tulane's physicality here, and just the fact that they're a little bit more diverse than Navy. It's great to see Navy and Air Force able to complete passes downfield this year. Malcolm Perry's been good at throwing the football. But I think Tulane probably has a little too much talent.
All right, Robbie, heading to the Big 12 battle for Texas. Texas at TCU, seeing 59 the total. 1 in the hook. That's Texas laying on the road.
Yeah, Texas, boy, that defense just isn't going to get any better, Drew. The injury situation is horrendous. You take a look at it again this week, and all you see, out, everybody out. Kansas last week put 47 on them. There was a bit of a reason for it because Kansas changed offensive coordinators, and Brent Dearman put his extreme tempo offense into play against a banged-up defense, and it worked. TCU, I'd like to say they have the athletes, but they're a little bit injured, and they really don't have the type of athletes anymore that they used to. They can run the football. Texas can't stop the run, so maybe TCU can hang in the game that way. But Texas certainly will be able to do the same. I find it hard to play a Texas game anymore anyway except over because their defense is so poor and Sam Ehlinger and company are so good at scoring points. So maybe I would look that direction. I might also look toward the dog because there's no sense. We saw it again last week against Kansas, right? There's really no sense in playing that beleaguered Texas defense when they're laying points. They do enough to win games right now, but it's not on the defensive end. So maybe TCU, but more than likely I'll take a look at over. Great
stuff, Robbie, as always. And guys, the coupon code VENO199 at checkout gives you the rest of his college football season for under $200. That includes bowl games, national championship games, all the props, anything he's releasing in college football. VENO199 at checkout rest of the season. Robbie, anything you want to throw out there before we shut this down? Yeah, I'm going to go check out the rest of the World Series, see if I can learn a little something about the NBA on day 2 here, Drew, and we'll get back with it with the NFL podcast on Friday. On Friday, he will be back. Well, thanks, Robbie, for the time. And, guys, best of luck with your bets. We'll talk tomorrow with Teddy Covers.